President Obama's final State of the Union. We examine the impact on religious freedom and why members of the audience matter. The Holy Father's first book as Pope. Meet the man who helped put it together, plus reaction from Rome. Turkey's deadly terror attack. Were tourists deliberately targeted? And a new way to grow your faith. See the videos designed to help you add virtue in just minutes. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, January 12th, 2016. President Obama prepares his final State of the Union address. He says it's aimed at the future. Tonight we hear why it's also framed by the past. Good evening, thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. We have team coverage of the State of the Union tonight from the Capitol. First, our White House correspondent and political director, Lauren Ashburn.
Brian, good evening. We are in Statuary Hall. We are just feet from where the president will address the joint session of Congress. Hundreds will be in the room, including Chief Justice John Roberts, many other Supreme Court justices, and guests as well. But as you mentioned, this is about not just the future, what the president can get done in the next year, but it's also about the past and his past accomplishments. It used to be that the president would list a laundry list of his accomplishments and his legislative achievements. Do not expect to hear that this year. We expect to hear a little bit more optimism about the future and more about the future generation. One of the things that is going to be interesting to watch tonight is the First Lady's box. In addition to the First Lady, she is allowed to invite several guests, and among them are immigrants and many others. Jason Calvi is with us. He spent the day here on Capitol Hill finding out who they were. Jason?
Yeah, each member of Congress gets to invite one person, and many people on this list, including Kim Davis, that's the county clerk, and that refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. The Little Sisters of the Poor are going to be here, among many others. Speaker Paul Ryan invited 2 members of the Little Sisters of the Poor. They're suing the Obama administration over the contraceptive mandate.
They do such a great job for our elderly, and to think that we would put them out of business because of the demands that's going to be placed upon them with the HHS mandate. It's good to have them seen and to be here to talk with people and let them know what the situation is. From nuns to royalty, Jordan's King Abdullah is here, as is Mohsen Jaffer, a Muslim American doctor.
That love for what the founding fathers did and that document they produced, I'm in awe, and today I'm here exactly where it all happened. It's a great honor.
The chair of the Democratic National Committee invited him to send a message about Muslims in the country.
I did that in response to the vitriol and hatred that I feel has been building, led by people who should know better.
Representative Tim Huelskamp of Kansas didn't give away his ticket. No one asked for it.
Most Kansans think it's another snooze fest. They want to move on because they know the president's going to talk about himself.
American Airman Spencer Stone is here. He's become an international hero for stopping an armed terrorist on a French train.
This is history, so I get to tell my kids, my grandkids, my whole entire family that I witnessed, President Obama's last State of the Union, and I sat in Congress for it.
County Clerk Kim Davis, I spoke with her on the phone today. She wouldn't tell me who invited her. It's quite a mystery here. We do know, though, that the First Lady invited the main plaintiff in that Supreme Court decision that redefined marriage last year. Lauren?
You know, Jason, there are so many people roaming the halls here, and there have been people at the White House. But the one thing I noticed was that there was going to be an empty chair for gunshot victims. And can you tell us a little bit more about other guests along that line?
Well, there's going to be also an empty chair for the victims of abortion. That's Representative Steve King of Iowa. He will have an empty chair in the gallery tonight for the victims of abortion. So that's quite a landmark move there on his part.
It is. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. And as I said, just moments, I guess at 9 o'clock, we will hear from the president. He is just down the hall. And the goal for him is to give an inspirational message, a vision for the future for the country. Brian.
Lauren, is the State of the Union still relevant today?
It is, if you ask the White House in particular. They don't often get an hour of prime time to talk about their accomplishments and going forward. But the relevance is also him setting up his history, his legacy here, and talking about how he will be remembered, essentially.
Of course, this is nationally televised, but how is this president effectively reaching young people outside of television?
Well, as you know, millennials love to dual screen, and the White House is making sure they are where the millennials are. And that means they've just opened an account on Snapchat. That's where you do a video and 7 seconds later it disappeared. They are going to be annotating the speech tonight on Genius, which is a platform where the White House can write things as the speech is going on. And they also are on all of the traditional platforms. You know, they also will be listening to what the president has to say about economics, because that is the issue most on millennials' minds.
All right, Lauren Ashburn at the Capitol for the State of the Union tonight. Thank you, Lauren. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Turkey's prime minister blames ISIS for a deadly suicide bombing today. It targeted the heart of Istanbul's tourist industry. Wyatt Goolsby joins us with the latest on the investigation.
Yeah, Brian, the Prime Minister says the terror attack this morning killed at least 10 people and left 15 others injured. The attack prompted an emergency security meeting with the country's top officials. The Turkish Prime Minister says the bomber was a member of ISIS with Syrian roots. The bomb went off this morning in a popular Istanbul tourist area between the Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque tourist attractions. Turkey's Prime Minister vowed to fight the terrorist group.
We will continue our fight against terror in the same firm attitude. We will never compromise, not one single inch.
At least 9 German nationals died in the attack. German Chancellor Angela Merkel offered her sympathies and promised Germany would continue to fight against terror. This afternoon, the U.S. State Department condemned the attack. They also say they're committed to working with Turkey, a NATO ally, to fight ISIS. Brian?
All right, thank you, Wyatt. The U.S. Supreme Court rules that Florida's death penalty system is unconstitutional. Justices say it gives too much power to judges. The Sixth Amendment requires a jury to make the decision. In Florida, the jury only gives a judge a recommendation. The ACLU says this ruling is another step toward ending capital punishment, since juries are becoming more reluctant to impose death sentences. Sergeant Bo Bergdahl returns to a military courtroom. He's accused of desertion after walking away from his Army post in Afghanistan. A military judge is now considering how to handle classified documents used as evidence in this case. Bergdahl was freed by the Taliban in a prisoner swap for 5 suspects held at Guantanamo Bay. After a mild start, winter hits parts of the upper Midwest and Northeast with heavy snow. Forecasters predict more than a foot of lake-effect snow in Northeast Ohio, Northwest Pennsylvania, and portions of western New York. Snow is also spreading across the Appalachians to New England. Pope Francis releases his first book as the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. We have Ed Pentin joining us from Rome shortly for a look at the content. But first, Mary Shovlain covered the book launch today at the Vatican.
Pope Francis's first book was released today, but more than a book, Pope Francis wanted it to be called a conversation. It is a conversation the Holy Father had with this man, Vatican journalist Andrea Tornielli. On hand to present the book at Rome's Augustinianum Institute today was the Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Parolin and even famous Italian actor Roberto Benigni. The book, entitled The Name of God is Mercy, reveals Pope Francis's intimate thoughts on this virtue, and Cardinal Parolin said the book's message is a personal one.
We are called to make a personal experience of that, not only as something literary, but something very vital for us.
The book is the fruit of conversations between Pope Francis and Andrea Tornielli, who wanted to simply ask the Holy Father what mercy means to him.
A dialogue between the Pope's heart and the heart of the people who are reading the book. It means with the personal life of the Pope. It's not a book of theology, it's not a theory, it's not an homily, it's not an official document, but it's a conversation. The Pope is trying to present and to communicate what mercy means for him in his personal life.
The book was released today in 86 countries, just in time for the beginning of the Year of Mercy.
Thanks, Mary Shovlain, reporting from Rome. Ed Pentin, Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register, is joining us. Ed, what is the essence of this new book from Pope Francis?
Right, Brian. Well, this book is really aimed at showing the merciful face of Christ, merciful face of the Church as well. and it's really geared towards reaching out to those who are deeply wounded. The Pope talks in the book about humanity being deeply wounded, and that he's used the field hospital analogy before, but he's saying this time he's going into more detail this time, and he explains how he's come to this conclusion, he's come to this vision of mercy, and he's really trying to focus on it and really bring it more clearly to people through this book.
Well, some media outlets imply that the book is strongly disapproving of those trying to uphold doctrine. Is that true?
That does appear in it, Brian. It appears more in the second part of the book, but it's not really a central focus of the book. It's much more balanced than that, and it's really trying to, as I say, convey that the church is really about mercy. It's not about condemnation, and it's opening the sort of channels to people who, as he said, are deeply wounded, and they don't feel that there's a chance to be redeemed. They feel that they're incurable, that their sin is incurable. So he's really trying to get around that with this book, and trying to sort of find language really to get people to know what the church is really about.
And how does he explain his "Who am I to judge" comment?
Yes, that's also part of this book. It's mentioned sort of halfway through. I think the question was perhaps put to him because there has been concern about this comment. It's been received poorly because it's been taken out of context. So he's tried to put it into context, and he's basically saying that he was paraphrasing the Catechism, and really wanted to point out that homosexual people shouldn't be marginalised and should be treated with delicacy. And he says he was grateful actually to have brought up this issue because he wanted to show that sexual identity is not the issue really, it's about the dignity of the human person.
Ed Pentin, National Catholic Register correspondent from Rome. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Brian.
Coming up, the President's domestic policy advisor gives us a preview of tonight's State of the Union. Then later, video virtues. One diocese tries a new way to engage people at home.
La preghiera dei fedeli cambia la Chiesa.
The Holy Father at Mass today saying, "It is the prayer of the faithful that changes the Church. It is not us popes, bishops, priests, or nuns that carry the Church forward. It is the saints," he says. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, we don't have to wait for tonight's speech to learn about the President's priority. White House correspondent and political director Lauren Ashburn gets the scoop from Cecelia Munoz. Cecelia Munoz is the White House domestic policy director. Lauren?
Well, she's saying what they have been saying all along, which is this is going to be an unconventional speech that we're going to hear from the president. It is not going to be a laundry list of his achievements. Let's hear what she had to say.
You can expect a very optimistic president and a very forward-looking speech. The standard State of the Union speech often includes sort of a litany of policy proposals, and the president has a very ambitious agenda. But he's thinking more about the future. He's not thinking just about what we're going to accomplish this year. He's thinking about what we can accomplish in this generation and the next. So you'll see him looking towards the future and really trying to engage the American people.
For our audience, we are very interested in the faith-based initiatives that your group has put together. Will he touch on faith at all today, especially in light of bringing everyone together? I know that's one of his themes.
He will touch on values, and the president's values obviously are very much driven by his own faith. And he'll talk about pluralism, about this notion that it's diversity which makes us strong, and the respect and love that we have for each other is part of what makes us a great nation and part of what we have to contribute to the world. So you'll see a very optimistic president. You'll see a president who's bringing values into the conversation and who's looking towards the future and what America can accomplish in the world.
You've been here from the very beginning. What does this mean to you personally, Cecelia?
We're all struggling with the notion that this is his 8th State of the Union address. We can hardly believe it. We're really proud of how much we've accomplished, but so aware of how much left there is to do. So it's an important time. We're at an extraordinary moment in our country's history, and we work for a guy who really wants to make the most of every minute and make sure that we're focused on the next generation as much as the next week.
And it's been mixed emotions, as you can hear from Cecelia Munoz, about the last speech that President Obama will be giving, State of the Union speech, in front of a joint session of Congress tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. Brian.
Lauren Ashburn, thank you. And it's a tradition dating back to our first president. George Washington delivered the original State of the Union address. The White House sent us pictures of presidents getting ready for their time in the spotlight. Here's one of President Truman with members of his cabinet outside the Capitol. President Clinton sat with George Stephanopoulos, his press secretary, in the presidential limousine before his speech in 1994. And 10 years later, President George W. Bush practicing his State of the Union address. Not all presidents gave a speech. Some just sent a letter to Congress. Well, the plaintiff in the Supreme Court case legalizing marriage between same-sex couples is invited to the speech tonight. With Jim Obergefell there, the president is expected to address the redefinition of marriage along with so-called SOGI laws. Dr. Ryan Anderson researches and writes about marriage and religious liberty for the Heritage Foundation. Please explain SOGI laws.
SOGI, sure. It's an acronym, SOGI. It stands for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. And what these laws do is they create a new class of protected citizens based upon sexual orientation and gender identity. They take existing anti-discrimination law that protects against racism, against sexism, and they say that sexual orientation and gender identity deserve the same sort of legal protections.
And make a connection between the SOGI laws and that Supreme Court ruling that legalized the marriage of gay couples.
Sure. So what we're now seeing is that in jurisdictions that have these SOGI laws, bakers and florists and photographers are being accused of violating the SO part. Then we're seeing schools that have bathrooms, men's rooms for men, ladies' rooms for women, being accused of, quote, gender identity discrimination if they don't allow the transgender student to use the bathroom or the locker room of his or her choice. So what it does is it says people who believe that we're created male and female, and that male and female are created for each other in marriage, are the functional equivalent of racists by elevating sexual orientation and gender identity to a protected class like race.
So do you see anything in the way of protections for those of us who believe that marriage is between one man and one woman?
Yes. So at the federal level, there's a bill called the First Amendment Defense Act, introduced by Senator Mike Lee, Representative Raul Labrador. And it simply says the federal government could never penalize any individual or institution because they believe that marriage is the union of a man and a woman, and they act on that belief, whether it's in their school, their charity, or their business. States and localities can enact similar policies. They can also reject SOGI laws. So this past November, the citizens of Houston went to the ballot box and they voted about 2-1 to reject that city's SOGI law. And we're expecting tonight that Governor Pence will issue his State of the State address and will announce where he stands on Indiana's proposed SOGI law.
So what else do you expect President Obama to address tonight that would be of interest to us?
Who knows what to expect that will be of interest. What I would like to hear him address tonight is to tell the little sisters in the audience that he's not going to persecute them any longer, that he's going to allow them to operate according to their beliefs, that he's rescinding the HHS mandate. I would like to have him announce tonight that he supports the First Amendment Defense Act, that he's not going to allow the federal government to harass anyone who believes marriage is the union of a man and a woman, and not to penalize them in any way, shape, or form.
Don't hold your breath. But those little sisters in their full habits, they'll be very visible.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Ryan Anderson, thanks for joining us from the Heritage Foundation. Up next, the Supreme Court weighs critical issues affecting religious freedom. And they call it 2 Minutes to Virtue. Learn how these short Catholic videos may help grow your faith. The people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. From today's Gospel according to Mark, recounting reaction to Jesus' teaching in the synagogue. Thanks for joining us on Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and like most Americans, we Catholics lead very busy lives. That leaves little time to work on spiritual growth. Catherine Szeltner shows us how 2 minutes could help you grow in virtue.
How much can you squeeze out of each second?
In 2 minutes, you can take an elevator ride to your floor, heat up your lunch. Or this video series says grow in virtue.
It is so easy and it is a click away.
Virginia's Arlington Diocese recently launched 2 Minutes to Virtue, a video series targeting busy Catholics. It features a short homily on the Sunday's gospel reading and always ends with a challenge.
Pick one thing about your life that you want to change.
During the week, I can go back and listen to it again, so I can remind myself and recheck, am I doing the challenge?
Kathleen Wilson, a mother of 12, says listening before Mass helps her focus in church.
If there's anything going on around us, like a person in front of us distracting us, or a kid, 5 heads down that we need to grab, or, just something heavy on our heart. And so I feel like if I listen to the 2 Minutes to Virtue right before going, when the gospel starts, I kind of go, oh yeah, this.
Kathleen's husband is a government contractor in Saudi Arabia, where going to Mass is illegal. Kathleen shares her husband's own words on 2 Minutes to Virtue.
I certainly hope they continue with the program. So tell them there is one Catholic sitting in the heart of Islam that looks forward to these motivating messages each week.
In a time Pope Francis is telling priests to keep their homilies short and simple, busy Catholics in Virginia or abroad can now get the gospel on the go. Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thanks, Catherine. The administration's contraceptive mandate gets its next legal test in March. The Supreme Court is expected to hear arguments in the legal challenges to the mandate. Thomas Aquinas College is one of the plaintiffs. Dr. Michael McLean is president of Thomas Aquinas College. He's joining us by Skype from Santa Paula, California. Dr. McLean, can you in a nutshell just tell us what the brief you filed last week includes?
Sure, Brian, I'm happy to do that. Our attorneys filed on our behalf a brief which argues that the HHS mandate is in violation of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which was signed by President Bill Clinton in 1993. The act says that the government cannot substantially burden religious exercise without a compelling government interest, and only if they're pursuing the least burdensome means of doing so. And in our judgment, the HHS mandate fails on those 2 counts. It does not enact a compelling government interest, and it does not utilize the least compelling means.
The government came up with this so-called accommodation. Why is that a problem for Catholics and Catholic institutions like yours?
Well, the accommodation is, in the government's eye, a way for the institution to kind of opt out, if you will, of the HHS mandate. However, the mechanics of the accommodation really do require the institution to cooperate fairly substantially with the provision of the objectionable coverage. And so we've argued that the accommodation is not really sufficient, and consequently we're opposed to participating in the HHS mandate.
Mike, would you say the government's view of religious exercise is too narrow?
Absolutely. We think as faithful Catholics that we ought to be able to practice our faith in a robust and compelling way, and really conduct our business in accordance with the teachings of the Catholic Church. So for years, we've provided health insurance to our employees without contraceptive coverage or abortifacient coverage, and our hope is to be able to do the same under the Affordable Care Act.
So one of the plaintiffs in the challenge to the HHS mandate, along with the Little Sisters of the Poor and others, is Thomas Aquinas College based in Santa Paula, California. The president, Dr. Michael McLean, joining us tonight on EWTN News Nightly. Mike, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian.
And what a beautiful campus. Well, ahead of tonight's State of the Union address, the Family Research Council gave its annual State of the Family address last night. Council President Tony Perkins says the First Amendment Defense Act is a vital part of protecting religious liberty.
This measure should not be necessary in a nation governed by constitutional principles. But those principles have been severely weakened, and Congress has a responsibility as a co-equal branch of government to make the meaning of the First Amendment plain and potent again.
Perkins says that act cements protection of the free exercise of religious beliefs and moral convictions about marriage. And with its 45-40 win over Clemson, Alabama's Crimson Tide now has 4 national football titles under head coach Nick Saban. Saban is a devout Catholic. He reportedly attends Mass before every game. He and his wife Terry started the foundation Nick's Kids. Their website details their efforts to help children who are mentally challenged. They belong to St. Francis of Assisi University Parish. Sporting News reports that parish breaks ground next month on a new Saban Catholic Student Center. It will accommodate the nearly 3,000 Catholic students on Alabama's campus. Well, the Powerball jackpot is now worth $1.5 billion, more than double the previous U.S. lottery record. The jackpot for the drawing tomorrow night keeps going up because so many people keep buying tickets. Join us tomorrow night for complete coverage of the State of the Union and the Democratic response from South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley and other Catholic analysts. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night and God bless you.